What happens when two seasoned business leaders get together? They talk shop, of course. Sit back and listen in as Scott DeLong and Vince Moiso share from their experience around current issues facing executives, entrepreneurs, and their leadership teams. The CEO Podcast starts now.
Hey everybody, Vince Moiso here from the CEO Podcast. I'm here with my partner, Scott DeLong.
Hi folks.
And today, Scott, I was really thinking about a topic here, and we're both readers.
Yeah.
And I think we not only spend a lot of time reading, we've embraced the fact that we're lifelong learners, and reading is just a part of that learning process.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And I started to just reflect on how much reading I've done over the years, and when that kind of kicked in for me. And I was trying to figure out what books really influenced me, and how and what point I became such an insatiable reader.
Yeah.
And so I thought, what a great topic for us to just discuss around, okay, how did it start? When were you totally driven to start reading books? And, when was the shift toward, for me, I was thinking about what was the shift from when I really started to move over and transition to more nonfiction and business books and then once I did that, I felt like, wow, I can't get enough of this. What's the next best book? So you're going to learning events, and you're meeting with others, and you're talking to others, and you're always looking for what's that recommendation. So I thought we'd just start with how we were influenced into reading, what books impacted us over time, and where we could give maybe some top 3 reads to our listeners.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'll just start then. So I was not a reader at all, through college, not at all. In fact, I graduated with my undergrad degree without ever reading a book. Serious, that's serious. I did not read a book. I had a pretty good memory, so I'd listen to the lecture, and I'd do good enough to get a 3.2 grade point average, and that made my dad happy, and I was good.
Yeah,
I didn't crack a book in college.
Wow.
It was just anyway. So the first time I remember reading a book was I was 27 years old, and I came across a guy by the name of Tom Peters, and 80-something-year-old dude right now, but he was the guru at the time. Yeah. He wrote In Search of Excellence.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I came across a book that I just loved the title. It was called Thriving on Chaos. And that's how I figured my life was.
Yeah.
So that was the first time I picked up a book and read it. In fact, I made my boss read it when he offered me a promotion. So I was the Western Regional Sales Manager at the time, and he wanted me to come to New Jersey and live there and become the vice president because he really needed help.
Yeah.
And I said, we can talk about it, but you have to read this book first. I actually made him read the book before I would take a promotion.
I love it.
And it was my first book.
Well, so tell me what that's interesting to me. So in that book, what was the big impact to you that would push you to give that to your boss at the time and say, hey, I need you to read this? Why?
It was about customer focus. The main piece of his book. So he's generally a business guru, but he really wanted to focus on getting out of your office and talking with the customer.
Yeah.
And, back in the 80s, we didn't do that. We just, you had these management systems, and you put those in place, and people would buy your product because it was so awesome and all that. But this really had a customer focus to it. And the other thing that he did, we're talking about the leadership portion, because Peters is the leadership guy. He used to call it something MBWA, management by walking around, which I'd never heard of before.
Yeah, I like that.
When people are walking around, they're looking over your shoulder, they're micromanaging. This is management by walking around and engaging the employees. So his was customer first and employee second. And that's how I grew up, from 27 on, learning the business world. So that was my first book, and the first time I did it. And then, being me, I forced the guy to read it because I had to read it. So you have to, I don't know why, but it really was.
Well,
it changed me.
It spoke to you. Obviously what I hear from that is the book spoke to you in a way that, you didn't realize at the time. And And it sounds like that book, I haven't read that book, but it sounds like, Tom Peters is teaching a very customer centric approach, and it hit you.
And he's in your face kind of style as well. So he's the kind of guy I played ball for.
Very direct. Yeah.
So
I like that.
That kind of coaching style wasn't anywhere near what I do today in my world.
Yeah.
But it worked for me. So that was my first book. How about you? When did you start reading?
Well, I read interesting. As I really reflected on the history, and I was thinking about, gosh, when did I really pick up a book? My oldest brother, and I've shared this before. I'm the youngest of 5, and there's a decade that separates my sister and I, who's the next youngest, and then they're 2 years apart. So my oldest brother is 16 years older than I am. And so I grew up.
So he's in my generation.
Yeah. Well, I grew up though, imagine as a young kid, my siblings being that much older, they're all in high school and graduating high school. I was an uncle by the time I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
So that's the generational gap right there. But, so my oldest brother for my birthday, and I want to say it was probably around like my 9th birthday ish. And he bought me the J.R.R. Tolkien books. So he got me The Hobbit and the Fellowship of the Ring. And I actually read both those books, but at a time that I didn't fully understand. I mean, if you've read those books or even recently gone through those books, it's written in a way that, a 9 or 10-year-old would struggle to totally grasp.
To understand.
Yet I still.
So you read the fantasy portion, not the depth.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So I was into that fantasy portion, and ironically, by the time I got to high school, I didn't want to read shit.
Yeah.
Like I had no interest. I mean, like once I truly had to start studying, I read what I was required to read, and that was it.
I didn't even do that. Honestly.
I for me, it's a strange thing because that's the first book I really remember. I remember that my brother got me the set for my birthday. I read those 2. It's a trilogy. Mm-hmm. The third one is Lord of the Rings, I think. And I didn't read that third book. I got through the first 2 books, but yeah. And then from there, it's literally just drops off a cliff, because then all I remember are all the books I had to read for AP English and, literature and these other courses that I was required to do. And not so much. I mean, like I have to say there wasn't a book I was trying really hard to reflect on. Was there a book that I was required to read that I actually read in high school that impacted me in really any way? And honestly, I couldn't come up with it.
Nope.
I couldn't come up with it.
Like I said, we had required reading too when I was in high school.
Yeah.
I didn't do it though. I was good enough at taking the stories from the other kids who were reading it and making the story out of it and writing the report. So anyway, I'm glad I'm not like that anymore.
Well, so let me tell you, I'll fast forward. And as I'm graduating high school, and my other brother gave me a book, and it was by Vince Lombardi. And being an ex-football player and being as committed and obsessed with football as I was at the time, that book interested me.
I bet.
And it's called Winning is the Only Thing. And you can imagine, if you know anything about Vince Lombardi or the history of NFL football, he's about as hard as they come. Yeah. He's about as direct as they come. And I remember reading this book, and it really it blew me away. It blew me away in the sense of like, wow, it took my whole attitude toward winning and how I looked at winning to a whole other level. Now, it didn't drive me to read more. I wish I could tell you that book impacted me in the way that it was like, oh shoot, I want to read more. It really didn't. It just happened to be of interest. I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
It happened to be of interest to me because it was written by Vince Lombardi.
I get it. But that's not your coaching style today.
No.
Winning at all costs, right?
No.
Driven and all that. So there was a switch somewhere for you.
Yeah.
As there was for me.
Yeah.
Because I used to be like that. I mean, you couldn't beat me in anything. I just would not lose. That was my whole approach. And therefore, anyone that I was going to be working with couldn't lose. And come to find out, so I didn't understand, what do you mean failure? There's no such thing. You just keep playing till you win.
Yeah.
as opposed to learning from failures and disappointments now, right? Which is, to me, so much better. I wish I would have learned it earlier. So when was a switch then from a book that got you because it was Vince Lombardi to saying, hey, I'm going to learn something here? When did that happen?
Okay. So you're going to laugh at this one. So, I grew up in an Italian-American family, right? Five kids. It's Vincent, Teresa, Anthony, Michael, Angela.
With Saint names as the middle name.
All the nieces and nephews are variations of those names. So yeah. And so you can imagine in my household, the number one movie was The Godfather. Okay. And I was in college. I was at the summer going into my senior year. And I ran the sports camps at University of San Diego while I was there every summer, and it was a blast. So I'm there, and my two older brothers were collaborating on this Godfather book, quotes from The Godfather, and I thought, I've never read the book. I've probably watched the movie at that point in my life. I don't know how many times, enough to quote many scenes in the movie, right? And I remember them talking about just how powerful the book is, and you got to read the book. So I read the book that summer, and I was just mind blown. I was completely mind blown because it was my first taste of, one, how a movie can take so much away from a book. Sure. Because there's so much in that book that it could never make it to the big screen. I think even doing Godfather Part 2 didn't totally do it complete justice. The book is really unbelievable, and the depth of the characters. There were a couple chapters I read twice just to kind of go back and go through what was going on with the character development. Then it dawned on me, like, there were so many lessons within The Godfather, just from, if you think of it from a business perspective or a family perspective, take the violence out of it, right? Take the violence and the fact that we're talking about mafia, and what you've got is this story of the American family, right? And it was really unreal. I was emotional about it. At that point, I read every Mario Puzo book, nonstop for the next year or two. And then I was introduced to Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code. Yep. Because at that point I went away to Europe, as you know, and I was playing football out in Europe, and I had time on my hands to read, and I read every Dan Brown book. Like I couldn't put the books down. I got into the history of it. Those two authors, I would say, had just an incredible impact on me and reading from that point.
Okay, great. Let's go back and take it into the nonfiction world then. And because I'm pretty sure there's going to be a couple books that we both will have on our list. Mm-hmm. And one of them for me, in fact, this is one of the first nonfiction that I went through, and it was Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We've talked a little bit about that on the show before. But that was a big deal. There's only 7. I only have to do 7 things, right? Well, you got to do some of them pretty well. Yeah. But that was an impactful book for me as well. In fact, I've used part of what Covey talks about in this concept of the circle of trust that we built, which is the listen to understand, right? Or as you've said, seek first to understand, and using that as a listening style, understanding instead of replying, instead of for defense, and all of that. So that book, really impactful. If you haven't read The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, you need to. I just think you need to.
Well, I took the course. So what drove me toward that book, I mean, let me give you this piece, because, I'm missing the transition. At one point, I tired of fictional books, and somebody, handed me, what they handed me was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which was an old book, and it was completely mind blowing. So I've since read that book, I think 3 times. But shifting back over to, later on, The 7 Habits, I actually took, because they do Covey does an actual course, and it's 7 Habits for Highly Successful Managers.
Yeah.
And I took that manager course and then realized, oh no, I have to read the book. Like it was great to do a weekend course. And I got a lot out of it, from planning to, how to utilize the 7 habits. But I needed more of an in-depth understanding of what was going on here. So then I read the book, and I have ever since absolutely incorporated my two favorite are Begin with the End in Mind. Yep. And then my other is Seek First to Understand. And that just exactly as you said it, just taking that stance of seeking first to understand has totally changed my listening of others.
And the relationships that you can develop with others because you're willing to listen in that manner.
No question.
It's powerful. So I actually like the Begin with the End in Mind. I've changed that and say, so for lifestyle stuff, right? Yeah. Write your obituary and work backwards.
Exactly.
Right. So that's how I try to.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. How I try to live the life now. And again, that came from the 7 habits. So lately though, I'll tell you a couple of things that I've been working on and studying and use it for my own book. You know that I'm just finished up writing my own book. I'm
excited for
That's going to be just so you know, a little shameless plug here. In January, it's going to be available, and we'll let you all know. But there's one piece in there, and it's about leadership issues. But this happens to deal with meetings and teams and things, and there's a topic that it's been really high on my list lately, and that's creating psychological safety. So Amy Edmondson wrote a book called The Fearless Organization. And I love that. Fearless meaning you might be the boss, but I'm not going to be intimidated by you because of your listening style. You've created this psychological safety so that it's okay for me to do that.
Yeah.
And then another guy, actually, old BYU guy, Timothy Clark, wrote a follow-up to the concept, and he called it the 4 stages of psychological safety, which is inclusion. Just how are you welcoming people, that. Right?
Yeah, I love it.
And then learner safety, being able to ask the dumb questions.
Yeah.
They're not dumb if I don't know what the answer is. That's why I'm asking, right?
Yeah.
The contributor safety, being able to give some ideas, and then the challenger safety. No, Vince, I don't think that's going to work. And here's why, right? Being able to challenge whoever you're dealing with, the boss.
And be comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love by the way, I love psychologist authors that, adapt these type of things to the business world, right? Yeah. So one, just if I could throw a third in there for you, is by Jonathan Haidt. I think you've read it, Happiness Hypothesis.
I have not read that.
Oh, it's a really great book. I recommend it to anybody, and Scott, I recommend it to you, but it is, coming from a psychologist and understanding, you can relate to it personally, but you can also adapt it to business, and you understand. I think that the premise of that is when you understand happiness is a choice, it changes your outlook on life.
A choice you get to make.
Absolutely.
Right? Not just, it's a choice. The old way used to be, hey, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, right? Make a choice. You get to, you're allowed to.
You can create your own happiness.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it boils down to. It was great book to add in there. And I love that. I love what you said there. Well, I'll jump back to, just the all-time classic by Dale Carnegie. I mean, it still blows me away. I think the book was written 1929 ish. And the fact that the content in that book is still so relevant today is crazy. There's a couple of things that I love. My number one by far from that book is just be genuinely interested in others. Yeah. I mean, the message is so strong throughout so many of the chapters.
Genuinely is the right answer, because I've seen people read that book as a manipulation tool.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
but that's not what it's about. It's not what it is.
No, in fact, the theme of authenticity is throughout that book. And if you really read it, and I do recommend if you've read it, read it again, because when I went and read it for a second time, it was a different experience for me after that first time that I read it. And that is a book that I recommend that you read multiple times, because you'll be surprised at what you get out of it as you've shifted and maybe even applied some of those things into your life. But the other one, the biggest thing out of that book too, is just the listening, right? He gives this whole anecdote around the way people listen. And he gives this example at a dinner table. And he talks specifically around, and we've talked about this before, Scott, on other podcast episodes, is this just incessant need for human beings to be right. And we listen in that way.
With confirmation bias. It's the things that I can add on to make me look even more right.
Yeah. So that book has been so influential on me. And when that was introduced to me by a mentor later on in my life. And Jim Connolly, thank you very much. By the way, just a little shout out to Jim if you're listening to this podcast. Appreciate that amazing gift.
So isn't it amazing though that 1920s is when that was done, still relevant today. The Thriving on Chaos was in 1980, 79, 80, something like that. Still relevant today. Maybe some massaging here and there, but the basic concepts are still there.
They are.
Well, so I'm going to give a couple more books that I really like. My thing is trust. My dissertation was on building trust in a cross-functional work group.
Yeah.
So trust is the thing. I think trust and communications are the two most important things in the business world. And so there's a couple books that I'd like to recommend in that. And actually, Stephen Covey's son, Stephen M.R. Covey, wrote one recently. He's the Speed of Trust was one that he started with, but then he just came out last year with Trust and Inspire.
Yeah.
Now, is it a book on trust or is it a book on leadership? The answer is yes. It's on both.
I love
it. Trust and Inspire. It's just so it's an easy read, a fast read. He tells stories. I don't think he's nearly as intellectual as his father, but he's a better storyteller than his father was. So that's a book. And then if you want to get a little more analytical, a guy named Paul Zak, who was at the Claremont Colleges, professor up there, he wrote a book called The Trust Factor. So he talks about the neuroscience of trust and how that and how that's built and what that does to you. Yeah. What it does to or for you, I should say, not to you, but does for others as well. So trust is a big deal. And those are a couple that I'd recommend if someone wanted to pick up a book on learning more about trust. Sounds like a simple subject, right? Let's go learn how to trust. Well, that's just something you learn in the playground. Sure it is. Yeah.
Well, it makes me think, Scott, just to take a break, because I have a couple of other books that I want to recommend as well. But, it makes me think, like, how can we share with our listeners, like, how do we get all these book recommendations, And so I also, in reflecting upon what books have impacted me, over the years, I also reflected on, well, how did I get here? How did I get this stack of books? The books that are behind us and the stacks that are to the left of us. And I have these same stacks at home, many of which I've read, many of which are on queue or in my queue to read. And EO has been a massive influence for me over the last 8 years of book recommendations. And oftentimes it's as simple as going to see somebody speak, so I use the example of getting introduced to the 7 Habits was because I took a course, right? And then I recognized, oh, wow, I need to read that book. Or, many times I've gone to see somebody speak, right? And as you get impacted by whatever the content is that they're reviewing there, you buy their book, or they might have book recommendations, so I've read many books in that way. And then my own EO forum. So as whether you guys are involved in groups like Vistage or EO or YPO or anything that you're involved with, more than likely your forum groups or your groups that you're meeting with have book recommendations, and you gotta read those books. You really gotta. And then I discovered Audible because I wanted to read more and more. I was
going to talk about that.
And I discovered Audible as just an easy way as I'm in the car, as I'm on a plane, or even when I'm at home. Sometimes I just pop in my AirPods and I'll just listen to the book. And I've been able to get through more books. I still do both. I still physically read a book. I haven't totally switched over. So I do both, but it has allowed me to do, and in some cases, I've read the book, physically read the book, and listened to the author.
So sometimes I go the opposite, right? So if I think I might be interested in a book, rather than read it, right? Sometimes I'll buy it on Audible first.
Yeah.
If I like it, I will definitely buy the book on top of that. Why? Because if I have the book in front of me, I can dog ear the pages and I can highlight and I can go back and forth. Yeah. So if you look at some of the books that are behind us here, there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
So, and then there's other times where I use Audible just the opposite. So you said something earlier that read the Dale Carnegie book again.
Yeah.
Well, And here's why this works is if you ever gone to a movie and you see something, you go to it a second time, you see more. It's like your vision starts opening up and you see more and more and more.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes if I like a book, I will buy the Audible version because I do road trips and sometimes fly and I'll listen to it again and again and again and get to keep it. So I was just going through my Audible list today and I have hundreds of books in my Audible library. In addition to the hundreds that are here.
I've got a bunch in
and a lot of them are the same book. I have it in print and in Audible both. Yeah. Whether I've listened to an Audible first or I use it to refresh myself on the idea, I think it's powerful to go back and do that again.
Yeah. Michael Singer is one of my more recent favorite authors. And he wrote the Untethered Soul, Surrender Experiment, and his new book is called Living Untethered, which is what I'm currently listening to on Audible. I wanted to step back though, because I do, most recently, one of my favorite books that has definitely impacted me is by an author, Tim Grover. And Tim Grover was the trainer for Michael Jordan. He also trained Kobe Bryant and Dwayne Wade, among many, many, many other very famous athletes. He went out and trained the entire Rams team during their Super Bowl season last season. He actually got one of their Super Bowl rings as being an honorary member of the Rams team. I got to see that Super Bowl ring. It was pretty awesome.
Can't lift it, but you can see it.
No, I got the pleasure to meet Tim and see him speak live. I had read his books before that, but he's got two books out. One's called Relentless, and the other's called Winning. I recommend that you read them both. Relentless was probably the one that had the massive impact because what I love about his writing style. One, he's very direct, incredibly direct, and in your face. Which I really, really like that style about him. And secondarily, I love the essence of experience share, which is what he does in his book. Is he's sharing what he did and what was successful about that approach and what was successful of jumping into this relentless mindset that Michael Jordan had or that Kobe Bryant had. And so it's, doing the things that others are unwilling to do. Sure. And getting into the mindset. It's like being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Are his
books different enough that you'd want to read both?
Oh yeah, you got to read both. Yeah. Okay. You got to read both. Winning, the book Winning is all about mindset. Okay. The book Relentless is more of that experience share. Okay. And so I highly recommend that you read both books. But both of those books have been super impactful. Relentless was really, really impactful.
So since you spoke about mindset, there is a classic book, and this is maybe 20 years old as well, called Mindset by a Stanford professor called Carol Dweck. And Carol talks about two different mindsets. Uh-huh. There is the fixed mindset. This is the way to do it. And then the growth mindset. Right. And the growth mindset is open to new ideas. They might not all be great ideas, but you're open to the new ideas. Yeah. And what she says is that we're both. We do both. There are just some things that we fall back. Fixed mindset is easy. That's what everybody does. We fall back into that from time to time. Yeah. But where the power of learning and growth and change is in the growth mindset. So if you like learning a little bit more. In fact, I've used that as required reading for some of my coaching clients. Is when I started seeing this fixed mindset. Here, I got a book for you. Let's do a little book study on this right now. So that one's Carol Dweck, Mindset. So glad you brought that up.
No, I love it. Well, and I'll let me mention this because I want to just do a quick shout out to my forum mate Dee Mamano, who was so gracious to invite me to see Tim Grover. So she's the one that put that on for her team at her business and invited me and a few others to be able to participate in that. And it was really a special night. So Dee, thank you so much. And I would tell you this, it was probably one of the biggest compliments. We were finishing off the year in our forum, and she went around to each of her forum mates and said, each of you reminded me of a book that I read that impacted me. Oh, wow. And that's cool. And my book was Relentless. Wow. And so that was really cool. It was just, it was super awesome. So Dee,
what a great thing for her to do.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Like, it was amazing.
I don't need gifts. Right? I got enough stuff, right?
Yeah.
but that's a gift.
Yeah, that was such a gift. So D, thank you so much.
Well done, D.
I have a question for you because there's one other book that I want you to talk about because you've talked about it on many podcasts. You've mentioned it to me many times, and that is Humble Inquiry.
Okay. So Edgar Schein, organizational psychologist. He's probably close to 90 years old now, lives up in the Bay Area. And this is a storybook. I normally I like to give me the facts kind of stuff. Yeah. This was a storybook. And Humble Inquiry is a great title, but it's the subtitle that made more sense to me.
Yeah.
The Gentle Art of Asking and Not Telling. Like, wow, that was impactful. So I talk a lot about getting not just compliance, but commitment. I can get compliance by telling you what to do.
Sure.
If I have enough power, right? Yeah. I can get compliance by doing that. But the gentle art of asking and not telling to get commitment. And my favorite question, what do you think? My favorite question. It's so simple. Yeah. What do you think? And then sit there and go back to Cubby and listen to the answer. Oh my gosh, a whole book to get to that one question. What do you think?
Yeah.
And that's changed a lot of things. So there's another one. Another client wanted me to come and do a presentation on a book and I hadn't read it yet. Yeah. It was called Change Your Questions and Change Your Life by Marilee Adams. So I just read that. And it's like, oh my gosh. I mean, it's a storybook as well, talking about this fictional character named Ben, but it is exactly the same coaching I would have been providing. Like, it's just like, change your questions, change your life. A friend of mine, Bob Donnell, has a line that I love, and I've asked if I can borrow it and steal it and use it, and he said certainly. And then he goes, you want to get better answers? Ask better questions.
Yeah. Well, it's Scott. I would imagine that book. I haven't read that book, and I would imagine though it's a lot of what I'm so redundant about, which is language, right? Yeah. I talk about how important language is and how you structure an email to somebody and how you're asking your questions. And certainly, it's what we talk about is like, even if you follow that seek first to understand mantra, then the question that you ask is seeking to understand rather than, the tone of your voice to the body language.
In EO, they talk about asking a question, not turning a statement into a question.
Sure.
Which we do that as well.
Sure.
Don't you think you'd look better in a blue shirt? That's a question, isn't it? No, no, that's not a question. Right. So learning how to do that and asking better questions to get better answers, change your question, change your life. Marilee Adams. It was interesting. It was fun, but it wasn't like serious, but it was a fun book and a fable. Kind of a story. There is one more that I've got to talk about because this is going to be a future podcast.
Sure.
Jim Kuznis and Jim and Barry, 37 years ago, wrote a book called The Leadership Challenge. They are about to release the 7th edition in January of the Leadership Challenge.
Wow.
That is required reading for all of my coaching clients, executive coaching clients.
Wow.
That we will require that because there are 5 principles that they talk about a leader. Now, remember, 37 years ago wasn't how leaders were leading, and they wrote this, and they keep selling more and selling more. So Kuznis and Posner, The Leadership Challenge, a must read, especially if you want to work with me.
Well, and that's exciting. He's going to be a guest on our podcast in an upcoming episode, correct?
Yeah. And actually, come to find out, and I didn't know this at the time, but I got to know Jim fairly well. We're not best friends or anything, but I got to know him. And so I talked to him about Tom Peters. He used to run Tom Peters' organization.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool.
That is really cool. Anyway. Well, we've hit that time. I feel like when it comes to books at this point in our lives, Scott, we could probably talk about this for a very, very long time. Yeah. And then there's a laundry list of books that we could recommend for various reasons. So, I think if I can give away anything at this point is, you've really got to go after the books that speak to you.
Yep.
So when you get that opportunity and you're at an event or you get a recommendation or any of those types of things, those books that really speak to you, you gotta read them because I continue to just know that I'm always going to get a nugget from any of the books that I read. So I take it very seriously. When I hear somebody really getting passionate about a book recommendation, that's when I'll grab my phone. I pulled my notes out.
Yeah.
I'll put the name and author on there just as a reminder for myself to go. I do that often, and then I'll just go on Audible. I'll download it immediately, whether I'm actually going to listen to it on Audible or get the book. It's a quick reminder that I have that in my library. And I think going to see authors speak, as a quick message. I got to meet the author Joe Ehrman in a book that had an incredible impact on me. It's called Inside Out Coaching. You've heard me talk about it before. Yep. When I saw Mark Trestman speak, and I went to see the author speak. It's like if you get an opportunity to go see the author speak and you hear from that first point of view and the passion, from their perspective and the passion around the story, it enhances the experience around the book, especially those that are, that contain a lot of experience share within the book, and that particular book did. And I just use that as an example because I get goosebumps talking about it, thinking about, I was almost in tears when I saw Joe Ehrman speak about.
So here's the thing: in their 45-minute keynote, or let's say it's an hour keynote, they can't possibly give you the depth.
No.
So if you like what they have to say,
read the book.
Go get their book.
Yeah. Go get the book. Absolutely. And those are great opportunities. So I'm just suggesting that if you get a chance to go see an author speak, go do it. Take those recommendations seriously. Ask for recommendations. Certainly, we've given you plenty of recommendations throughout this podcast. And you've got plenty to choose from that can impact you in a lot of different ways.
And here's the other part of that. I don't follow anybody 100%. Like,
sure,
I will take theirs and adapt it to my life, to my needs and whatever, right? Rather than saying, oh, here's the prescription. No, it's not a prescription. It's a book. Read the book and adapt it to whatever that you need from it.
Such a great point.
And we'll talk in another podcast about how I actually run my courses that we do and use this thing called the concept matrix, makes it even more powerful. And we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Well, I'm going to be a fortune teller for a second because I see in our near future, maybe sometime in January, that we're going to be doing a review of your book as a podcast episode.
I think that might come. So that might be possible. Certainly.
All right, everybody, as usual, thank you so much for listening. You can check us out on all the regular podcast channels. Please go on to theceopodcast.net, reach out to Scott and I. If you've got any feedback on future topics, we love to hear it, and we always want to hear from
we have gotten listeners. Some great topics from listeners that we wouldn't have thought of on our own, I don't think.
Yeah.
But we got to dig into some topics because of the listeners. So please send us an email, check in and let us know what you want to hear about. We can talk about lots of things.
Yeah. Until next time, cheers.
Thank you for joining us for the CEO Podcast. Please visit us at theceopodcast.net, where you can learn more about our co-hosts and listen to past episodes. If you would like to have a discussion and dive deeper into any topic, there is also an option to contact Scott or Vince to schedule some time with them. Thanks for listening.